Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for Health Professional Radio. We'll be speaking with Pranob Bhattacharya this morning. He's joining us here as Vice President, Head of Oncology Clinical Operations at Astellas. He's going to talk about the acceptance of the Marketing Authorization Application, or MAA, by the European Medicines Agency for the regulatory review of Zolbetuximab for the potential first-line treatment of patients with certain types of gastric cancer. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Pranob, thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having us.
Tell us a bit about yourself briefly, and then let's talk about this authorization.
Yes, my name is Pranob Bhattacharya. I serve as the asset lead for Zolbetuximab and also serve as the Vice President for Oncology Clinical Operations at Astellas. It's a great, exciting time for us on the Zolbetuximab program as we disclose results from our phase 3 studies, but also just the amount of interest across the globe for this investigational agent to make its way to patients.
What specific conditions is it indicated for?
Zolbetuximab is an investigational agent, and we are targeting Claudin 18.2 positive tumors in the HER2-negative gastric or gastroesophageal adenocarcinomas that are locally advanced, unresectable, and metastatic. And these are, again, tumors that are Claudin 18.2 positive for this investigational agent, Zolbetuximab.
So what's the current regulatory status of the compound across different markets?
Yeah, so there is a lot of excitement with the readouts of our phase 3 studies and for Astellas to pursue a pathway to make this investigational therapy available globally. We recently announced the MAA acceptance in Europe. The FDA also accepted the Biologics License Application, which is the BLA for Zolbetuximab on July 6th. This year in Asia, Astellas submitted a new drug application to Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, which is the MHLW, on June 9, 2023. And then the Center for Drug Evaluation in China, the CDE, again accepted our BLA this past July 31st. So a lot of excitement with these regulatory submissions and milestones.
What makes Claudin 18.2 an attractive target in this research?
So Claudin 18.2 is an emerging biomarker. And as with any biomarkers, we're expanding our view of what patients we would treat and trying to get to the comprehensive profile of a patient that would benefit most from any of these agents. So biomarker testing is very important, as you're all realizing. Claudin 18.2 is a member of the Claudin family of proteins. Claudins are a major component of tight junctions that are in the intracellular spaces between cells and regulate the flow of molecules in between such cells. In preclinical studies, we've seen that Claudin 18.2 may become more exposed and accessible to antibodies as the gastric tumors develop. And Zolbetuximab acts as binding to Claudin 18.2 on the cancer cell surface of these gastric epithelial cells. In our preclinical studies, this binding interaction then induces cancer cell death by activating two distinct immune system pathways, which are the antibody-dependent cellular toxicity, or ADCC, and complement-dependent cytotoxicity, CDC. And as with any novel biomarkers, as they emerge, they offer us many more opportunities to advance the care of metastatic gastric and GEJ cancers in patients.
How do you see the compound influencing the gastric cancer treatment landscape in the future?
Yeah, so with our two large phase 3 studies reading out, we have clinical confidence in the potential that this investigational therapy would definitely add to the standard chemotherapy that our patients get typically in gastric cancer. And again, we are targeting Claudin 18.2 positive first-line gastric GEJ adenocarcinoma. So that confidence has increased again in this group of patients, especially with our trials. In both of our phase 3 studies, Spotlight and Glow, approximately 38% of the patients screened for these trials had tumors that were Claudin 18.2 positive. And again, this helps us show there is a significant potential patient population that could benefit from this therapy. And again, we see that as far as the staining intensity of Claudin 18.2 goes, we at about greater than or equal to 75% of tumor cells that show moderate to strong membranous staining are the ones that are targeted in our patient population. So we definitely see zolbetuximab influence the gastric cancer treatment landscape by being able to target patients that would potentially benefit from this therapy.
What about safety and side effect data?
Yeah, so our large phase 3 studies, showed that there were the incidents, as with any large phase 3 study, that there were incidents of serious treatment-emergent adverse events, but they were seen to be similar across both the arms. For example, in Spotlight, we saw a 44.8% versus 43.5% in comparison to the zolbetuximab versus the placebo arm. And the same was seen in GLOW as well, with our treatment-emergent adverse events being similar across both arms at 47.2% versus 49.8% in the zolbetuximab versus placebo arms. So, again, this is very consistent. Again, knowing how the first-line metastatic, locally advanced patients, the adverse events that they see, the most frequent treatment adverse events that we saw were nausea, vomiting, and decreased appetite across both studies.
Is there anything that you'd like to add for our listeners, and then give us a website where we can learn more?
Yeah, so firstly, we're extremely pleased to be in this time of the year where we're busy with multiple submissions to regulatory agencies, and with our trials having read out positive, both of our phase 3 studies, there's great interest. It's not just one phase 3 study, but it's 2 that have repeated the same positive results. So there's a lot of hope for our gastric cancer patients, again, those that are Claudin 18.2 positive. We are currently focused on other potential therapies for hard-to-treat cancers as well. And for any of our clinical trials information, obviously, clinicaltrials.astellas.com can be accessed for additional information on other ongoing studies.
Pranob, I appreciate your input this morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Health Professional Radio. Hopefully you return and give us some updates on the progress.
Will do, Neil. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Audio copies of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au, also at Anchor, Spotify, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.